In the 1990s, the culture offered a predictable response to anyone claiming they had been abducted by aliens. These stories were treated as late-night punchlines or supermarket tabloid fodder, and the people telling them faced immediate social exile. The medical establishment maintained a rigid consensus. Physicians automatically categorized these claimants as suffering from schizophrenia, temporal lobe epilepsy, or a desperate need for attention. A patient named Scott spent years undergoing exhausting neurological tests as doctors searched for a biological cause for his visions. They prescribed heavy doses of anti-epileptic medications, attempting to drug away what they assumed were seizures. Sheila, a social worker, arrived at the clinic with severe suicidal ideation and what she described as electrical dreams. Her previous therapists dismissively misdiagnosed her terror, labeling it a grief reaction to the death of her mother. These clinical responses consistently failed. By refusing to listen to the patient's actual experiences, the medical community compounded their trauma. These individuals were left isolated, gaslit by the professionals they turned to for help. John E. Mack held one of the most prestigious positions in his field, the head of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School. His intellectual reach extended far beyond clinical medicine. Mack was a respected historian, having won a Pulitzer Prize for his exhaustive biography of T.E. Lawrence. When Mack first encountered abduction claims in 1990, he was skeptical. He initially suspected that interviews with these claimants would reveal obvious, textbook indicators of mental illness. This chart displays results of standardized psychological testing Mack administered to claimants. The data points sit firmly within healthy and above-average intelligence ranges. The pathological threshold is completely empty, proving zero obvious signs of mental illness among the people interviewed. Mack was looking at a population experiencing severe distress, with no traditional psychiatric explanation. He realized that the Western medical model was failing to explain the reality these patients were describing. Mack adjusted his clinical perspective, choosing to view the abduction phenomenon as an authentic mystery. He began treating patients as co-investigators of their own experiences, rather than subjects of a delusion. He utilized simple relaxation techniques and modified hypnosis to bypass his patients' social defenses. This allowed them to speak freely without fear of the ridicule they faced in the world. Mack ignored the sensational aspects of the stories to focus on the severe somatic trauma held in his patients' bodies. His sessions were designed to help them safely access and release these trapped emotions. While peers obsessed over disproving the stories, Mack focused on the emotional reality of their distress. This shift led to clinical results that traditional psychiatric methods could not reach. Sheila sat in Mack's office and gave voice to the terror she had suppressed for years. This release was fueled by the sudden realization that a doctor was actually listening and believing her. Scott's clinical progression was equally marked. By directly confronting the terror he'd buried, he moved past his misdiagnoses, reaching a state of calm and self-sufficiency. However, Mack saw that individual therapy sessions were not enough. One-on-one treatment could not solve the deep societal estrangement his patients felt upon leaving his office. He took the unusual step of opening his own home to his patients. He established regular support groups, acting as a facilitator for an underground community that had previously been forced to hide. Mack found that trauma recovery depended on removing the wall of silence between the patient and the world. Healing happened when the isolation was replaced by a community of peers. Mack's methods helped his patients recover, but his empathy for their stories pushed him outside the orthodox boundaries of the university. In 1994, Harvard Medical School launched a 14-month confidential investigation into Mack and his professional conduct. Peers accused him of being professionally irresponsible. They claimed that validating his patients' accounts reinforced their delusions, causing active harm. The university moved to strip a professor of tenure, an action that had not occurred in over a century. Mack was facing the full weight of the medical establishment. The institution was willing to dismantle a brilliant career because it prioritized its own reputation for scientific rigor over a doctor's actual success in treating his patients. Mack refused to back down or abandon the people he called experiencers. He hired high-profile legal counsel and fought the investigating committee to defend his clinical work. The investigation ended with the university retreating. Harvard formally reaffirmed Mack's academic freedom and his standing within the Faculty of Medicine. The debate over the physical reality of alien encounters remains. But in Mack's clinic, the literal truth was always secondary to the undeniable psychological reality of his patients' suffering and their path to recovery. Rigid institutions often fail those who need help the most. Mack's career demonstrated that a simple willingness to listen to the impossible can be the most effective medicine a doctor can provide. To understand how this medical mystery forced a Harvard skeptic to question his most deeply held beliefs, we have to look past the psychological evaluations and open the files on his 3 most physically corroborated cases. We start with the case of a young man named Ed. It was a damp, foggy night in July 1961 on the rocky coast of Maine. Ed and a friend were sleeping in the back of a vintage station wagon, parked just 100 yards from the crashing surf. During the night, Ed reported being floated out of the vehicle and pulled into a luminescent pod suspended precariously over the cliff edge. Inside the craft, a silver-haired entity delivered a series of complex environmental warnings about the breakdown of Earth's life support systems. Here is the chronological problem. Ed's encounter happened 2 full months before the famous Betty and Barney Hill case. That was the event that first introduced these specific abduction details to the global media. Because Ed's memories formed before those stories ever hit television screens, his account suggests the core details of these encounters exist independently of pop culture. For Mack, this indicated that the phenomenon was not a product of media suggestion. Moving up the ladder of proof, we look at the case of Catherine. While driving late at night through the Saugus Woods north of Boston, her car mysteriously died on a deserted road. Her vehicle was swallowed by a blinding light. An almond-eyed entity opened her door, triggering several hours of missing time. Without external proof, an event like this is usually dismissed as an episode of sleep paralysis or a solitary hallucination. But the next morning, local TV news stations reported that police and multiple witnesses had tracked an unidentified flying object moving over Catherine's exact driving route at the precise time of her blackout. Her missing hours perfectly matched the external police tracking data. This moved the phenomenon out of the subjective mind and placed it as a physical object in the sky. The final case file involves a man named Carlos on the windswept, isolated Scottish Isle of Iona. While hiking at dusk, Carlos witnessed a colossal peach-colored shaft of light crashing down from the thick clouds directly into the ocean bay. With a camera around his neck, he snapped a photograph of the beam just before the light enveloped him, abruptly erasing his memory of the rest of the evening. When Carlos later developed the slide, he took it to university physicists for analysis. They ruled out natural phenomena, like a solar pillar, specifically noting the anomalous sparking activity in the water exactly where the beam struck. With this photograph, the investigation crossed a critical threshold. A patient had captured a physical, verifiable record of an event that defies the known laws of physics. When you stack the files, the pattern is difficult to ignore. A pre-media timeline, independent police tracking, physicist-verified photography. This weight of evidence exposed the vulnerability of the materialist paradigm, the rule that if we cannot measure a phenomenon with standard tools, it cannot exist. But when you compile hard data from these encounters, they collide with that traditional scientific model, and the container breaks. Mack reached a conclusion that cost him his standing in mainstream science. His patients are reliable reporters of a phenomenon that exists beyond our current ability to measure. If the evidence was powerful enough to dismantle the skepticism of a Harvard psychiatrist, it leaves us with one unavoidable question. What else is modern science missing in the night sky?